As I mentioned before, we get really, really weird tickets for Have I Been Pwned. Now, just before I started this, 6 minutes ago, an hour and 6 minutes ago, I've had another meeting. I lost track. I got this one. Now, I will read this exactly as it is submitted. Hi, I'm requesting a full refund, exactly as it was written, as I have no clue what this is, and I did not make this charge. Thank you. Now, this fascinates me. And the reason it fascinates me is that on the surface of it, it almost feels like one of those fishy sort of tickets, because we get these every now and then when someone's like, hey, I made this charge, I want a full refund. Here is a link to a Google Doc. It's like, I see what you're doing. No, we won't click that. But this is an attached JPEG, and I open the JPEG on my iPad, and someone has paid $37.50 American dollars, the good ones, not the Australian dollars, on a MasterCard. And I have to wonder who is going around the internet buying shit they don't understand and then asking for a refund. And also, if you did not make this charge, how do you have the receipt? It's fascinating. I honestly don't know. I do not know. I just like, how do you get here? Anyway, good morning, everyone who is joining. Wayne, Aaron, Marek, and the Evil Cougar. Hamish, g'day, good morning. Your good morning. Aaron says it's not this time again. I say, yeah, well, see, now it's normal time, but because I did this, when I do it I did it on Monday. So now we're back on normal time, which is when it should be. And then I'll have one more of these to do before we head overseas. 2 weeks from now, I'll be doing this with Scott Helm. That'll be fun. We'll do another one of those. And it will be 2026. Let's do the sponsor. Sponsor you may have heard of, 1Password. Apparently they they do good things. Now, it's a little bit confusing the way this is done lately, because I've had 1Password Extended Access Management sponsorship title there for a very long time. And 1Password uses an agency which sends through content. And it appears that the content is more around enterprise password management at the moment than extended access management. And I'm pretty sure that if I click extended access management, I go through to enterprise password manager. Anyway, let's talk about the enterprise password manager bit. And I think a lot of people don't quite get this, but I remember many, many years ago, 1Password, if you bought an enterprise license, would give you a free personal one. And you sort of go, that's nice. It's like a perk. But I remember speaking to people there, and they said, well, the rationale is that it's not like you come into work and you have a completely different security posture to when you're at home in terms of your brain. Let's say the way you create passwords. You don't go into work and you go, I'm going to make really good passwords. And you go home and it's like, I'm going to use the dog's name. You tend to carry your security practices with you. And their view is that if you were able to replicate the same security practices at home as what you were in the office, then you'd be better all round, and it would actually be better for the organization too, because you just wouldn't be using the dog's name anymore. Anyway, totally tangential. That wasn't in the list of things that they sent me. The point is that there is obviously a massive need for not just password management, but secrets management in the organization. One of the things I've noticed, I do this myself, and I've seen other people doing this lately. I don't think they just learned it from me, because it's already there in 1Password. But every time I share a secret, like for example, I have to send someone an API key or something, I put it in 1Password and I create a shareable link, and I make it visible only to a specific email address and only for a window of time. And then I give them the link, and the person who gets that link then has to receive an email to that address within the time window, and then they get access to the secret. And that's a pretty good example of how it's not just passwords. I wonder if it's always going to be 1Password, or if ever that name will change. What happens when it's all passkeys? That's not on my list of talking points. I don't know. But it is interesting that there is such a focus on the enterprise. And I think to the point of passkeys as well. I mean, this is one of the other things that's having to evolve. 15 years ago, when I started using 1Password, we didn't have passkeys. Everything was a 1Password password. So anyway, Enterprise Password Manager, protect every secret From sign-ins and SSH keys, didn't mention those as well, to sensitive documents. You can put documents in your 1Password. I don't know if I mentioned that. Enterprise Password Management helps employees get things done securely and arguably, not in the copy here, but arguably easier. It is one of the very, very few security paradigms where it's more secure and also more easy to use. Win-win, everybody's happy. Now, next week, I will be making up for doing my video late last week and not talking about Malwarebytes. So we'll talk about them next week. Next year, I think I'm going to do something quite different around sponsorships. And I'm thinking about how to articulate that. So I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and hold it over until we get to next year. I think that the brands next year will probably be much more. None of these fit me properly either. Will probably be much more like this. Who's got Have I Been Pwned merch yet? Don't tell the rest of the family, but some family members are getting Christmas presents. So does Have I Been Pwned merch. For folks listening to this later on, this is the dark blue Have I Been Pwned visor with the light blue embroidered logo. We do that in a white and a black as well. I got so many props for today. Charlotte ordered a heap of stuff. We have traditional caps as well. These are all on merch.haveibeenpwned.com. Fourth Wall is the organisation that produces all of these. We do have things other than hats apparently on the way as well. I quite like that one as well. It's just like, it's black on black. That's a nice little subtle touch there. My Have I Been Pwned hoodie is actually something I enjoy wearing. And I don't really wear much merch anymore. So go and check that out. That's I'm not telling you to go and buy your family members Have I Been Pwned merch for Christmas, but if you did, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Let's look at the comments here. Aaron, have you tried SSH Engine in 1Password? Bitwarden's one doesn't work great if they even have it. How do you know it doesn't work great if you don't know if they have it? No, I actually have not tried that in 1Password. I feel like I've tried most other things in 1Password, but I have not tried. I don't spend a lot of time doing SSH stuff, if I'm completely honest. How do you use it? If you, well, yeah, I can't answer it. Apparently it's good, so go and give it a go. Right, so today, in part because it was really only 4 days ago I did the other one, and in part because, if I'm honest, most of the time since then, I've been doing a combination of things. I just realized what I had been doing, and it wasn't a very good excuse. Yesterday, I was loading a bunch of data breaches. A couple of days before that, and it's a totally non-tech, but I know there are some people out there that enjoy this. I went to a Lamborghini drive day and drove Lamborghini Temerarios around the racetrack, and that was fun. I enjoyed that. But that is totally non-work related. If you do have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them, but it's not particularly on topic. What is on topic is I've got a desk full of IoT things. And the reason I started thinking about talking about IoT stuff is I feel like every week when I do this video, someone has an IoT question, and I spent a lot of time doing IoT or IoT periphery stuff the last few days. And much of it has to do with this. Now, I'm holding in my hand, I've got to check the right acronym here. I think it's an RCBO. Let me have a look. It is a white plastic thing. Let's just start with that. What do you say? It is an RCBO, which is, I literally had to ChatGPT this the other day. And as we talk about the IoT stuff, we're pretty much going to go from the ground up, starting with the electricity. Wayne says we call them RCDs. Now, I'm really just going by the term my Sparky uses. Incidentally, this is one of the things that we're not allowed to install ourselves in Australia. Basically, the only thing we can install ourselves in Australia that's related to electricity is a light bulb. That's it. You're not meant to do anything else yourself. And I don't think that that's completely bad either. Here we go, RCBO. It is a residual current circuit breaker with overcurrent protection. Now, basically, this is the thing where if you've plugged in a bad kettle or something like that, the switch trips. It's a circuit breaker. And the reason I'm holding this here in my hand is that during the course of this week, which then related to all sorts of other IoT related issues, this one in particular kept tripping. Now, part of what made this very painful is that the circuit this is on drives everything that you see in this room. So every single time this tripped, the PC wouldn't shut down immediately, but the UPS would kick in. And I got about 20 minutes worth of juice out of the UPS based on the things that are sitting on it. So when this trips in the middle of the night, I come down and the UPS is dead because there's no battery power, and of course the PC is off. Now, unfortunately, the way this house has been designed, this particular circuit breaker not only does my office here, it does the ensuite, which is next door to us, and that turns out to be where the problems are. Now, the ensuite's got all the normal stuff that you'd expect in the ensuite. It also has a smart toilet. So when you get up in the middle of the night and you feel like a little bit of a bathroom break and you can't flush the toilet, and the toilet lid doesn't open either, because it's smart, it normally does it automatically. You walk in, you get this nice welcome toilet lid that opens. Does the master bedroom. Does the ground floor living room where the Christmas tree with the lights are. And because it is almost Christmas, and because Charlotte is Norwegian, not having lights on the Christmas tree is apparently a major, major issue. Not that not having power for the PC and where I actually do all my work and make a living is also important. But anyway, Christmas tree lights. So this was tripping consistently. Now, it had tripped, and I mean, we've all had this before, right? Something trips and you're like, oh, I'll just turn it back on again. We'll just see if it does it again. And I'd turn it back on and it'd be fine for like 2 days. And then it would trip again. And we got to the point where I would unplug every single thing that I can unplug that I know is on this circuit. And every time I moved it, it would trip. So Sparky came out yesterday, replaced this, everything tripped again straight away. Eventually turns out that the underfloor heating in the master ensuite, incidentally, underfloor heating in Australia, very, very unusual because, as it is today, it's constantly 30 degrees plus, certainly in the part of the world that we live in. But again, Norwegian, so we have underfloor heating. So something in the underfloor heating is causing this to constantly trip. So Sparky came out, disconnected the underfloor heating. I'm happy now because my computer works. Charlotte is distressed because it's 34 degrees outside and the tiles are at a 17-degree temperature or something like that. Anyway, the point is that as far as it goes with IoT stuff, obviously everything all has to start with the electricity and the way things get isolated and protected. I have a server rack. It's what, a 3/4 height rack that has switches. It has my Home Assistant yellow Raspberry Pi running on it, driving all the IoT things. It also has a UPS. It's a rack-mounted UPS. As I have learned recently, including yesterday when all the power to the house had to be turned off, the battery on that is pretty much cactus, and that UPS lasts about 2 minutes maybe, so I need to get a new battery for that. But it's almost like being able to support the foundations upwards is kind of essential. Like if you don't have that bottom foundation for your IoT network, then everything starts to go to hell. Now, eventually we will get to IoT things, but assuming that we actually have power to drive all of the IoT things, which by definition are usually mains powered, we will talk about a bunch of battery powered stuff. We've got to have that as a starting point. I'll talk about network in a second and where my time's gone this week with network. Let's look at the comments. Aaron says, you've never installed any Shellys yourself, have you? Not from scratch. Let's just leave it there. Now, I have about 102 in the house. Now, if I'm completely honest, I'll tell you, well, all right, I will fall on my sword here. That the one Shelly that I have installed from scratch is on the garage motor, and it's because it's a 12-volt motor. There's a terminal block on the back of it. That one I was quite comfortable with because it's just a bit hard to do too much damage with that. Hypothetically, if one was to die and someone who was not an electrician, who's also not me, was to come in and just replace it with another one and plug all the wires into exactly the same spot, I imagine that person would probably be okay. But who knows? That's not me. JMR, been using Google Jules to vibe code in the browser. Huh. Sort of sucks because it eventually gets bogged down. So I vibe coded a command line interface. That's awesome. Oh, very nice. JMR also said the toilet should flush with the power out. You could dump a bucket of water in, I guess. Now, yeah, no, you're right, and it can. But the way that happens is you take a side panel off. Oddly enough, the side panel is connected with Velcro. And that sounds dodgy. It's a Toto toilet, who are the leaders in Japanese smart toilet technology. But you take a side panel off and there is a little handle. You can pull the handle and it will flush because, of course, you still have water. You still have water pressure. It can still fill the cistern. You just have to do a manual flush. So we did actually find that. And that was fine. Now, Aaron says, sounds like you need to put a 48 kilowatt hour battery setup in. Now, so this is on the cards. There are still going to be times where you need to turn the power off. You know, having something upstream of the circuit board that provides power that is independent of mains, I really like the idea, but there'll still be times where you need to turn the mains power off. And I would like to be able to do that where, say in the case of replacing this RCBO, it's a 10-minute job. I've got 20 minutes of UPS power. It's fine. We have a lot of sun in Australia. This house does not have photovoltaic solar power. I qualified that as photovoltaic because we do have solar heating for the pool, but it's the kind where there's a pump down near the pool pump and it pumps water up into piping on the roof, and it's got all of these thin black pipes, and it sits there, gets a lot of sunlight on it, comes down the other side into the pool and heats the pool that way. We don't have it simply because this house didn't have it when I moved in 10 years ago. I have had time since then. I've had a bit of stuff on. As we expand this house into the block next door, we're doing a big expansion of the house because I like cars and other reasons. We'll look at solar. We'll look at doing solar. We will do solar, I'm sure. I like the idea of battery as well because I like the idea of being a bit off the grid. I think a lot of it is being independent of grid, but I feel that's a more emotional thing than anything else because I cannot think in that 10 years of any time we've actually had a power outage. From a cost perspective, the return on investment is a very long period. I think the stats I've seen are something like 7 years before you break even. So it's probably not so much a cost thing. Of course, there's an environmental thing, which is good, but it's not like it's this overwhelmingly compelling argument to retrofit to an existing house. As you're building new stuff, it makes more sense. So that'll be on the cards, and we'll look at batteries and things like that. JMR's power outages. Yeah, that makes sense if you have power outages. So, JMR, would you be able to get a payback from day of use charges? I don't know. What I do know, the very little I know, is that all of these devices are getting more efficient, and maybe the ROI is actually better now if the costs has remained roughly the same, but we can generate more power. I don't know. Okay, so that's the power layer. I agree with the battery and solar suggestions. It's on the cards. Let's get to network. Now, I'm holding an SFP cable in my hand. The reason I'm holding that in my hand is the Ubiquiti network that I've got in this house. Ubiquiti for me is a little bit like 1Password. It's one of these organizations I willingly gave my own money to, love the product, and have since done a bunch of stuff with both organizations. So I've done a bunch of training courses on Ubiquiti stuff. They've sent me a bunch of stuff. Every single day I use their technology one way or another. Now, where do we begin? In case you're not familiar with Ubiquiti, I believe they are the #1 producer of wireless access points in the world in terms of they make the most. You see them all over the place. Once you start looking for them, it's like when you're thinking about buying a particular type of car and then you see them everywhere. It's that sort of thing. So they make access points which look like round discs. and you see them in hotels, in bars, in stadiums. You see them all over the place, and you see them in my house. It's not just the round disc. They create things like in-wall access points, so access points which literally mount onto the wall, and they have RJ45 sockets in place of, if you've got a wired house, like fortunately this one was. It's the whole house was already wired all the way back to a patch panel in the garage. You can replace those wall plates with access points, and they're just flush and they sit against the wall, and we've got one in most of the rooms here, which is fantastic. So I've now got a setup where I've got a unified Dream Machine. So the Dream Machine is what works as the internet gateway. It does all the DHCP and everything as well. That's kind of the heart of the connection. That's connecting via Cat6 and RJ45s back to my internet service provider. We've got fiber to the home here. We now have 2 gigabits, and that is going to explain why I started going down this SFP rabbit hole this week. Downstream of that Unified Dream Machine Pro, there are various switches in various parts of the house. There's a 48-port ether lighting switch right next to the rack, connected via SFP, 10 gigabit connection speed. The ether lighting is pretty cool because each port lights up with different colors. And then if you have the ether lighting cables, which there's one down there, but I won't unplug that because it's kind of being used to broadcast this. They've got a clear plug on them. So each port can light up to indicate different things, such as, for example, not just which one's got a connection, but I think you can segment them by different colors for different VLANs and things like that. Looks super, super cool. Now from there are different switches in different parts of the house. We've got one in an area where we've got a lot of media equipment. It's in there because it plugs into the media equipment. It was also a good place to terminate a bunch of the cameras that run around the house. Most of the cameras that we have in this house run over PoE, so power over Ethernet, which means, let me get a camera and a piece of cable. One sec. I literally have an entire drawer of Ubiquiti stuff. But if we take a camera like this, so this is from memory, is that a G5 Instant? Little camera like that. It has got an RJ45 socket on the back. If you're unfamiliar with that term, it's a network plug. So I can plug a network plug into one end of this, and then the network plug into a PoE-enabled switch on the other end, and it will do both power and data. So the reason why I got switches in different places, and there's another, I think it's another 24-port switch around the media center of the house, is that we've then got cameras in different areas of the house, which has got Ethernet cable into one end, into the switch in the other end, and that does power over Ethernet. So long as the switch is running, power is provided to the cameras. Then we end up with switches in different places of the house for different reasons. There is a switch here in my office because I've got multiple different devices that I run here. The PC is the obvious one, but often I'm setting up stuff like this or playing with different cameras or access points or things. So having a switch here is handy too. Now, going back to the SFP stuff. The other day I upgraded my NBN. That's the National Broadband Network here in Australia. Now, for the longest time, Australia was the joke of the world for our connectivity. And I remember for so long, I couldn't get more than about 140 megabits. And then it must be less than 2 years ago. We finally got gigabit, which is awesome. So gigabit all the way via fiber into the house. Fantastic. Speed testing from the PC, I could get about 940 megabits. Yeah, this is pretty much 94% of the way there. It's good, close enough. Now, very recently, we got the option of 2 gigabit. And I like that because it's twice as good. So I was like, yeah, YOLO. And it wasn't much more either. In fact, I was paying, I think, about 450 Aussie dollars, so let's call it 300 US dollars a month, because the only way I could get not just gigabit down, but about 450 megabits up. So if I'm uploading a big data breach or sharing files and things with people, that made a really, really big difference compared to, I think the other option was like 50 megabit or something really low. I was paying like 450 Aussie bucks. And then that got dropped massively because now all of that was available on a consumer plan. So it came down to something like $150. And then 2 gigabit came along and it was like another $20 a month. I was like, sweet, let's have 2 gigabit. So I use Aussie Broadband and I was like, yep, sweet, turn it on. Good job. Speed test, 950 megabits. What's going on? And what I realized is that the RJ45 port that the broadband modem was plugged into maxes out at 1 gigabit. Oh, shit, okay. But the SFP port, which is on the Unified Dream Machine Pro, can do 2.5 gigabit. And you can get an SFP plus to RJ45 converter. Now, unfortunately, this took ages to come because Ubiquiti was short on stock. Converter came, plugged it in, a little bit of mucking around. You have to go into your settings and change the WAN port from whatever number it was to the new number. So basically it goes from the RJ45 to the SFP plus. We will get to the IoT stuff as well. So now I can go to my Unified Dream Machine Pro and the browser interface has a little speed test and I can get, in fact, I was getting, let's do it again now because I'm going to spend some time in Ubiquiti as we talk about this. I think I was getting just over 2 gigabits when I tested it the other day, which is great. So I can go to my dashboard and I can go to ISP speed test and it connects. We'll see if that impacts the quality of this live stream at all. I'm getting about 2.09 gigabits down and 483 megabits up. Happy days. But now you start getting into this problem of where does the speed bottleneck end up? Because if I'm on my PC here and I test the connection, I'm still getting 940 megabits. So if we go from the modem backwards, so the modem is connected to the Unified Dream Machine Pro, that's getting 2 gigabits, that's fine. What about then from the Dream Machine Pro to the switch? Well, that's got a 10 gigabit connection. You can go into the UniFi interface and you can see for each port on a switch what speed it is negotiating at. So I can go to my Unified Dream or Unified dashboard here. I can go to my UniFi devices and I can go to the one that is my Dream Machine Pro and I can look at the ports here and I can see that the port manager, in fact, port manager shows you every single port and which speed it gets. So the one that goes to the broadband network is getting 10 gigabits and the one that is going to the switch is also getting 10 gigabits. And then I can go and look at that server rack switch and go, okay, well the server rack switch then comes up to my PC or up to the other switch here and that was getting gigabit. Why is it getting gigabit? That took some time to figure out. So we should be able to get more than just gigabit with ports that support it, and the ports here support it, with RJ45 and certainly Cat6, but we've got a lot of Cat5. Wasn't sure about that. And as you start to search more and more and more, and you go down the rabbit hole of where is the bottleneck of the speed, it's like, well, maybe there's a dodgy coupler somewhere, or maybe somewhere there is a bottleneck that's been artificially created. But one of the suggestions was go and get more SFP to RJ45 converters. So I got 2 of those and I put one in the switch here in my office and I put one in the switch down the bottom, and I took the 2 RJ45s that were plugged into other ports and I put them into the SFP ports, and now 10 gigabit, which is great. So I've got 10 gigabit all the way to the switch. And then I've got a Cat6 cable from the switch into my PC, which has a 1 gigabit network interface. So now the bottleneck is my PC. But as I've said before, I have a new PC on order. I was hoping it would be here before Christmas. It's going to have to be when I get back from travel. But that has a 10 gigabit card. So finally, I should be able to get maybe not the full 10 gigabits, but a lot more than 2 gigabits from my PC here, where I'm doing things like processing massive amounts of data all the way through to the internet. With me so far? Right. So, next problem. What about the NAS? I've got a NAS here where I store a lot of data. Now I've got a Synology rack-mounted NAS. You go and look at the specs for that. gigabit. Can do 10 gigabit, but to get 10 gigabit, you've got to go and buy another Ethernet card for it. So now there's another Ethernet card on order. It can do, I think it can do 2.5 gigabits via RJ45 and Cat6, or you order a big SFP cable and you buy an Ethernet card that has an SFP connector. And now we're back into this cycle again of SFP, all the things, and get away from RJ45s and particularly Cat5. And I'm just seeing a comment here. How do you get 2 gigabits with Cat5e? Check, what is the actual maximum rating? Now, to be clear as well, I didn't lay this cable. I think it's Cat5. ChatGPT. What is the max throughput for Cat5e? See what it says. Standard guaranteed specs, 1 gigabit. Common but unofficial use, 2.5 gigabits. For 2.5 base T, 5 gigabits for 5 base T. Not realistic, not supported at 10 gigabits. But now part of this as well, everything related to networking stuff and IoT is a constant path of evolution. One of the things that we're going to do as part of this house extension is completely move the point at which the internet enters the house, and then also completely move all of the network equipment. At the moment, everything is in the garage, and it's painful for multiple reasons. Number one, it generates a lot of heat, and it's sitting there in the garage with cars and things that I'd rather not have just sitting there in like a little bit of an oven at sometimes. Also, the internet enters the wall on the completely opposite side of the garage to the server rack, which means that the modem that is sitting there is plugged into mains power and has no UPS. As we rebuild all this stuff, just over this side, we're building a home cinema as well. And that's going to need rack. It's going to need something that we're building from scratch. It's literally like scorched earth, build the whole thing from scratch, make it however you want. When we do that, we'll build the space to terminate the internet there, terminate the internet with the modem in the rack, plug it into the UPS, plug it directly into the Unified Dream Machine Pro. Maybe we can get a modem with SFP, I don't know. But then we can actually do cabling from there into my office with whatever cable we want. And I will find whatever cable can give me the fastest possible speed through to this switch and hopefully get 10 gigabits from the PC all the way through to the Unified Dream Machine, and then 2 gigabits from that Dream Machine back out to the internet. And then later on when they I think Stefan's got something like 5 gigabits in ISN at the moment. So later on when they upgrade that, hopefully get more again. So it's a little bit of future proofing. I'm not going to be able to get more than, I think I'll be very happy, Aaron, if I get 2 gigabits. I just feel this house, when it was renovated, was something like 20 years ago, and I've been here 10. And I don't think the network technology of 20 years ago is really going to get me the speeds that we want in 2026. So we'll find out. We're just upgrading every little bit we can. And the cable is the one thing that I cannot control at the moment. When next door happens, I can then. Other comments here. All the money sold to broadband has now been spent on new gear. It's tax deductible. It's definitely a business expense. Marek says, anything to do with networking is a constant source, major pain in the ass. I mean, most internet users, outages are DNS based. Yeah, or I've screwed something up. It's usually one or the other. Cat 8 for new installs, 40 gigabits. Wow. Gordon Beaming. G'day, Gordon. Says, installing Unify gear opens a can of worms for stepping up various parts all the time. Life was easier when I had default gear. It was kind of, but also life was easier when I didn't have all of this IoT shit all over the place. So let's start talking about that. And to continue the network theme, one of the things that I've been doing in Home Assistant, we're very, very dependent on Shellys. So we'll talk about the Shellys. So I have a Shelly here for your entertainment. So this is a Shelly 1. It is just a relay that is power on, power off. It's not a dimmer. It doesn't have two circuits or anything like that. This has come out of some or other powder. I think we had this in, we've got like the fancy name is a powder room. It's a toilet. It's just a toilet and a basin downstairs. And previously we had smart lights like this in there. This is what most of our lights look like in Australia these days, by the way. We refer to them as downlights. They got these little like mousetrap clips on them that you constantly snap your fingers on when you pull them out of the ceiling, because they fold up like that and they go up into the ceiling, and then you pull them down and they go like that and mousetrap your finger. But the good thing about them is they are normal power sockets, or power plugs rather, which means that you can change these yourself legally without getting in trouble from the Sparky review board or whatever the hell it is. Now, I used to have IoT ones in there. So all I really needed is the switch on the wall. All the switch on the wall needed to do is control power to these. So I'd have smart ones in the ceiling and a Shelly and some cabling in between these, which is not my responsibility. When we renovated that room a few months ago, I'm yet to find an IoT light, whether it be RGB or just one that's to do warmth, that actually looks really cool. And I defy you to find one that looks really cool. There's a lot of really cool lights out there that can dim, but are not smart. And I'm actually okay with that. And with the number of iterations I've gone through with this network over the course of time, I actually genuinely think, unless there's a real need to change either warmth or color via RGB, that dumb light's the way to go. But what that means is that when you end up with ones that dim, this blue one no longer makes any sense. They do a green one, which is a dimmer. So this came out of the wall, the dimmer went in, and now we've got dumb light, dumb switch, smart Shelly behind it. And that's why I got a bunch of these blue ones laying around, because they're now surplus to needs. Now, one of the problems I was having is that every now and then, one or more of these is unaddressable. And when you got 102 of them, even 2% failure rate, you got a couple of lights that don't show up anymore. In my Home Assistant dashboard, I've got every single Shelly I have in the house on a graph that shows the last, what am I showing here, the last 12 hours or something, last 6 hours. And it's here on a graph because I want to see when it drops off and when it's not accessible, to try and figure out why. And one of the things I realized today, in our ensuite, there's 4 different lights just on one side of the wall, because there's lights that shine down on the basin, and then there's lights that are behind a mirror, and then there's lights that are under a vanity, and then there's 3 lights there, and then there's one behind you, which is for the bath, but they're all on the same light switch. So you've got 4 of these, albeit in green because they're dimmers, all sitting behind the one switch on the wall. One of them, the mirror one, kept dropping off. Like, I'm looking at this ensuite mirror, and there's a whole bunch where it's unavailable, and there's a bunch of time here where it's come back online, but I can see lots of breaks in the graph because it's become unavailable during that time as well. And what I found is that when I went into the Ubiquiti network settings, I can see that client roaming between access points. So with the Ubiquiti network setup, when you have multiple access points, you have a mesh network. So depending on where you are in the house, like as you walk around with your phone, for example, it will roam from one point to another. But these don't move around. These stay in the one place. But if they decide they've got a better signal in one place or another, they might roam. And that's where we started to get these dropouts. So one of the things, going back to Gordon's point about it being simpler before, is that now, yes, it's more complex. You've got a lot more devices, a lot more network dependency, but I can also go into my Ubiquiti settings and I can lock a client to an access point. So part of what I was doing this morning, as I was trying to figure out why stuff wasn't working, is those 4 different Shellys behind the wall. I found, I think 2 of them were connected to like the master bedroom access point, and they were rock solid. But then one of them was connected to like an access point in the backyard, and one of them was connected to they were all over the place. So I just locked all 4 of them to what should be the closest access point. It will not be able to roam now. And now I look at the graph and it's solid. It has not moved at all. But I can see other places. Like I can see the Shelly, which is one of the blue Shellys, just a relay, which turns the lights in the pool on and off, has got all of these broken lines again. So if I go back into my Ubiquiti, incidentally, I would share the screen, but there's a lot of stuff, including the address of my house, which it's not hard to find. I don't want to overtly publish it. So just bear with me. But if I go in here and I search for pool, and I find the pool Shelly, and it currently has an excellent connection. But if I go and look at the history, I can see it's connected to the entertainment room now, but yesterday it was connected to the one that's under our fish tank. And I can see that it's been roaming around to different locations. So what I should be doing is going and have a look at that, going like, do we just lock it to an access point? Like, what is the access point that makes the most sense? And a lot of the time it's going to be the one that has the closest proximity. But then also, as you get more and more access points for more and more Wi-Fi traffic, then you get into this like nasty cycle of, do I configure the network to be more conducive to an IoT device? So for example, I've got an IoT Wi-Fi network. It doesn't have 5 gigahertz enabled. It's only 2.5. A lot of the guidance I've read has said, look, your IoT does not need 5. Disabling that is better. What's the right word? Like floods the network with less other signals or whatever it may be. Someone will tell me I'm completely wrong here. But that seems to have helped a lot. And you just sort of go through this constant phase of tweaking and tuning and mucking around. Apparently I swear a lot when I'm trying to figure out why the fucking thing won't work. It is, yeah, a bit of a labor of love. I'm going to get on to more IoT stuff in a moment. Let's see what some of the comments here. JMR says, well, I like to run conduit so I can pull new cables. That'll run fiber. Yeah, I mean, when you have plaster off the wall, you have lots of choices. When you don't, you don't. Like, I've had this discussion with Sparky before. And it's like, I know this is going to be like a really, like, almost impossible thing, but how feasible is it to change the cable between the point which is just down here and the point which, as the cable runs, is probably 20 meters away through joists and beams, over ceilings, under floors, through wall? Like, even as I explained, you can see that that's just impossible. As we've renovated different parts of the house, we've stripped rooms bare. We did the kids' rooms this year, for example. And it's literally all the plaster off the wall, some of the frames moving. At that point in time, you can do whatever you want. As we're building over here, we can do whatever we want. I like that conduit idea, but you've got to be able to be in a position to do that in the first place. And I think that now, once you're in the position to do that, if you wire to future-proof, that should last longer. I don't know, how long am I going to be here? I've still got a lot of years left. Anyway, we'll see. That'll be a Sparky discussion as well. And with the access points, are they all the same password so the phone can pick up the next access point? Yes. So that they all broadcast the same SSID, they all have the same key. You can literally roam seamlessly between everything. But, you know, even that, how you configure the network to enable roaming is different for IoT, because the IoT things just generally don't roam. My laptop roams, our phones roam, my watch roams. But they do roam very seamlessly. I'm a little bit tempted to do a Ubiquiti video that walks through just some of the really cool features that are in there at the moment. But one of the things I've got, I'm looking it up here on my phone now, it's called Wi-Fi Man. And if you open up Wi-Fi Man, and I won't share this because it's got IP addresses and physical addresses and things, but you can see here that my phone is connected. So my phone is on 192.168.1.202. Fine. 99% signal strength because it's connected to the access point, which is, I'm going to say, 1.5 meters away down there. I can see that that access point is then connected to Troy's office switch, which is then connected to the server rack switch, which is then connected to the Dream Machine Pro, which is then connected to my Aussie broadband connection with the public IP address. If I was to start walking downstairs, what I'll see is the signal strength gradually degrade, and then the phone will roam to an access point with a better signal. Now that's going to have a moment of cutover, but it's not something like, even if you're watching video or something, there's an amount of buffer that allows you to roam through. So it just becomes a seamless entire house saturated network, which is very, very cool. Gordon says, most devices don't work great with 5. My IoT network is 2.5 only, but it's a pain doing things right across networks. I don't have the networking gene. And that's a world that has always been periphery for me as well. I keep dipping into it one way or another. I use a lot of ChatGPT these days to try and figure it out. But yeah, as James says, yes, a mesh network shares the same network, so transition is usually seamless. That said, as Troy has found out, older, dumber devices tend not to like it when they get moved to another AP. There is so much configurability in a Ubiquiti network like this. So like, let's just pick an example. So I'm here on this screen for the Shelly that drives the light on the pool. Now, if I go to the settings here, what can I do here? I can give it a name. I can assign it to a group, and then I can start applying different policies to a group. I can lock it to an access point. I've given it a fixed IP address. Now, this is not hard coding an IP address into the device, but this is telling Ubiquiti every time this device connects to the network, give it this IP address so that it always has the same IP. I do that with the Shellys because I've then got scripts that enumerate through all the IPs and get the state of every light, for example, or update every device. So every Shelly is a little web server and it exposes APIs, which is kind of cool. So I can control all those. I can create rules, traffic rules, restrict pool Shelly from accessing applications and domains by creating a traffic rule. So I could go into my traffic rules and have all sorts of access rules about destinations and sources and schedules. Do I want to do things at certain times of day? All of that's configurable just on the client level. And then by the time I start looking at an actual access point, I feel we haven't spoken a lot about IoT yet, but this is kind of the foundation. If I look at, I put a Unify Nano access point here yesterday. So the Nano one it's a round disc about, I'm making a shape about 15 centimeters in diameter. If I have a look at this device, I can see I've actually got, at the moment, how many clients from that? I've got 20 clients connected to that. So I've got everything from my iPhone, obvious, connected to that, through to, I've got IoT switches behind the PC here, so I can look at the power usage. Also, by having, in fact, I've got an example here. By having IoT switches, I can also tell when I lose power. So when I was having all the problems with the RCBO the other day, I created an automation and home assistant to say, when this loses power, let me know straight away. So I was out playing tennis the other day and immediately I was told, hey, your circuit's just tripped again. So these are cool because not only can you power them on and off, which I don't need to do here, but I can look at the amount of power that's being used. Incidentally, what I've learned is that all of the computing stuff in my house actually uses very little power. The thing that absolutely sucks the power is the pool pump. It uses so much more power than all the other computer things put together. Now that might be something which is useful later on when I look at things like solar, because we only run the pool pump during the day. So that's when the sun's out. Where was I? Okay, so a couple of these are over there. The sock that I've got on the wall here that shows all of my Grafana stats for have I been pwned and everything. That is connected to an IoT switch. The Raspberry Pi is connected to an IoT switch because I shut that down each night or when I leave the house. There's a whole other discussion about why that is. It's a combination of the fact it doesn't need to run. If there's cleaners or things here, I don't want the screens up. Also, I find that Pi needs a bit of a reboot because Grafana tends to crash Chromium fairly regularly. So might as well reboot while I'm out of the house or I'm asleep. Point is, there's a lot of different things connected to that one little access point. And I can then go into that access point and I can configure it. And I think I've got about a total of 15, 16 access points or something. fact, I can find out because I can filter my list to ones that are online and devices that are access points. And that is 18. I've got 18 access points in the house. So for this one, what radios are enabled? So both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz radios are enabled. They're broadcasting both the IoT SSD and the primary SSD, and they also all broadcast a guest network SSD. So I've actually got 3 different SSDs, which then have 3 different VLANs, which you can then apply different rules to. So what's the channel width? What's the transmit power for both 2.5 gigahertz or 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz? Is there any roaming assist, which then helps the devices move around? Can it mesh to the parents, and can mesh devices connect to it? So this access point here is hardwired into a switch. So all the connectivity from a device to the access point is obviously wireless, but then the access point to the switch is wired. I could power it via a PoE injector. So it's a little device that plugs into mains power. I could plug it into the power point in the wall behind, down there, and it could wirelessly uplink to another access point. And conversely, it could be a parent access point, so that a different wireless one could wirelessly uplink to that. So then you can have multiple access points that don't have to be wired together, but still form part of the mesh network. I've been meaning to turn that off, actually, because unless there's a good reason to do that, as I discovered recently, you can have problems. The problem I had was one of the ports on a switch burnt out. But because that switch had a wireless access point connected to it and it had meshing enabled, that access point meshed to a faraway access point, and I still had a connection, but the connection was absolutely rubbish. So I'm turning off mesh parent and mesh connect on anything that doesn't need it. This was a brand newie that I only pulled out of the box yesterday, so that's why it's there. Setting minimum RSSIs, which is client devices will be disconnected if they do not meet the minimum specified signal strength, so that if it's got a bad signal, the client will just get booted off. IP settings, do I want the LED on the top to light up? The point is that there's like near endless configurability for the clients, the access points. We haven't even gotten to the VLANs, the networks, the Wi-Fi networks, the switches themselves. There's a lot you can stuff up. Like, let's put it that way. There's so many things you can screw up when you have a network like this. And it can be a nightmare to troubleshoot it as well. Good example. There, Sonos on the right, next to the Lambo. That's a Sonos Play 5. I've had that probably nearly 10 years now. But we've got about 10 Sonos units in the house. And I really like it. When I'm not doing these videos, there's pretty much always music playing in the house and in my office as well. And it's background stuff, depending on what you feel like. Which is also why my Spotify year in review decided that my age was 83 the other day, because a lot of the time it's playing like Frank Sinatra or jazz or something just quietly in the background, so it doesn't feel like I'm in a freaking cemetery. Now, all of those Sonos units are also on the network. Now, I had constant problems when they were on the IoT network. So they are on the primary network. I think in the realm of devices that you trust or don't trust, I'm not so sure I trust like the cheapy smart IoT lights. I think we'll VLAN them off. Sonos, they've had their hits and misses lately, but I think in terms of security of their devices, I've got more confidence in them than a lot of the stuff on IoT. But when you start to have problems on the network with a Sonos device, it is a nightmare, because you've got things that are doing multicast communication, communicating with different devices, trying to sync them all up on a network that is using the same infrastructure as things like this, which are only working over the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum and not roaming. It's just, there was endless problems. And I tried to use SonosNet, which is their built-in mesh network, and I had different problems with that. Now they seem to be fairly reliable. I say that, but I'll finish this, I'll go downstairs, and it's like, why isn't it playing in the kitchen? Aaron, aren't your IoT devices on their own VLAN? Yeah, they are. Just before I started this video, I opened my LinkedIn and I noticed one of the maintainers of Home Assistant setting up a bunch of Ubiquiti stuff, and he was saying it's really important to get the right balance between isolating things and not going overboard, because if a device starts to malfunction, it can be really, really hard to troubleshoot what the actual problem is. And also, all of these things, including these Shellys, they do update firmware as well. You want to update firmware because every now and then they've got a vulnerability or a bug that needs a fix. Now, what if that firmware now needs to cause the device to connect to a different host name, for example, and you've locked things down so far that you're only allowed to talk to certain hosts? Stuff breaks. So finding the sweet spot is hard, and it's evolving too. Like you never go, right, that's it, I'm done. James says, is the Nano mounted on the wall? I remember reading that they don't broadcast very effectively if not mounted on the ceiling. Well, this one is facing upwards and it's got 20 devices on it. It seems happy. So Ubiquiti publishes, I'm not sure what the right word for it is, but images that show like the spectrum with the colors of how basically, I'm butchering this, aren't I? The ideal mounting position and which direction it will broadcast and how strong the signal strength is based on where it is. So every one of their access points has a document that explains that. That is part of the strategy as well. Like, what direction should the access points face? And then depending on where you put them, are they going to reach the right clients? Not just based on the direction they face, but what about the materials in the walls? Our walls here internally are timber with plasterboard. What if it was like full brick? Well, obviously you just can't get as much signal through there. So that's going to then influence your network design. One of the other big problems that has really driven me nuts lately, and I do have a fix for now, is we've got IoT door locks. We've got Yale Assure door locks. And firstly, IoT door locks are awesome. I love them. They're fantastic. When they don't work as expected, they're a freaking nightmare. Like, we were out the other day playing tennis again, and we had some cleaners here, and they've left. And we know they left because one of the door locks gave us an alert. They tie in via HomeKit, which is Apple's device. There's a HomeKit bridge integration Home Assistant, which can join HomeKit into Home Assistant so that you can see all of your Apple things and you can talk to Siri. So last week I was on this show. I was asking the lady whose name I can't mention again to turn the lights off, and the lights are turned off. It's great. So we got told like the front door got locked, but then we never got told the front gate got locked. And we're like, shit, so did they forget to lock it? And we eventually end up sending a neighbor over. It's like, can you please check that the door is actually locked because my watch is telling me it's not. The connectivity requirement was obviously far greater than the access point placement. So I got to the point where I've got a very long Cat6 cable, just like run out to the front area, plugged an access point in, put it in a place where it really can't stay, but does this solve the problem? And yes, it solved the problem. So I just simply didn't have good enough Wi-Fi connectivity to those door locks to be able to make them work reliably. So now my next challenge is I've got to figure out how to, excuse me, mount that more permanently. And there's an argument about not even having Wi-Fi because for door locks, because if you have Wi-Fi with the Yale Assure door lock and you're using, I think I'm using the August integration in Home Assistant. I forget the relationship there. August owns Yale or vice versa. But anyway, that's the integration which ties everything in. And I asked the lady on my watch, as I'm walking home, then it has to go up to the cloud, and then it goes down to the Apple TV, which is effectively the hub for HomeKit, which then goes to Home Assistant, and then Home Assistant calls the August integration, which then goes up to the cloud, to Yale services, and then comes back down and talks to the door lock. You can see all the different points where not only can it go wrong, but you add latency. So I think Zigbee would be a much better option there, because at least if I had Zigbee, it could be self-contained within the house. So I could have that door lock to Home Assistant being entirely local. You've still got to have connectivity, so you're still going to have repeaters and things like this. But I could solve that part of the problem. The other thing I could solve is if the door lock had home key integration. That's Apple Home Key, different to HomeKit. I could walk up and I could just tap my watch to it, and we wouldn't have any internet or IoT dependency at all. But unfortunately, those door locks don't have that. So I feel tired just talking about it. JMR says, Music Assistant just did some updates on how we sync music up across speakers. I've found, as a slightly tangential response to you, but I've found that speakers are a really important part of that home automation story, because there are many times where speakers make a lot of sense. Now, I'll give you several examples. When someone rings the doorbell, we've got a Ubiquiti doorbell. They press the button. Everything is self-contained for Ubiquiti as well. This is a nice thing. Even things like all your recordings for Ubiquiti cameras, if I plug this in, is local. It stays here. It's on my own devices. No one else has it. I love that. Ubiquiti doorbell. It's got the Unify integration for Home Assistant running. There's an event, which is the doorbell press. So someone presses the doorbell entirely locally. An event is raised in Home Assistant. I can then use Home Assistant to play a WAV or an MP3 or whatever, an audio file of a doorbell. One of those old school ding dong doorbells. And it plays through the Sonos in the main area of the house, which is great. So I don't need like an external chime or anything like that. And I can change it if I want to do something cool for Christmas, or I should do that actually, or whatever it may be. Speaker's great for that. The speaker's great. I've spoken before about things like, now in the AI world, I can use that doorbell to get a snapshot of who's there, send up to the cloud, get the cloud to describe it, send that back up, send the text of the description back up to 11 Labs, get the voice to explain it, and then play it through the speaker. Really cool. Our kids are teenagers. They like to go into their room and close their door and not be disturbed. But they both have Sonos soundbars in their rooms. And I have a button, just like this one here. This is an Akera Zigbee button in the kitchen. So if we're making dinner or something, I want the kids to come down. One press and both their speakers talk to them, which is great. Two presses and it talks more assertively to them. You're not down here yet. What's going on? And that's really cool. And I've found on many different occasions, I've just literally created a script and sent it through to our daughter to tell her to do something or other. You know, we're going out or we're going to do something. Now I'm going to see if I can get this to talk here. Yeah, I can do this. Mediaplayer.Troy Office. All right. I've still got the last one here. All right, I'll just play this. Let's see if it works.
Hell dear, don't yell or shout. The hour's cold, no doubt, no doubt. But your legs still work. They're not on strike, so hop right up and take a hike. A trip to the fridge, a journey so grand, you'll conquer the kitchen like queen of the land. Grab that aloe, triumphant and proud, then brag to us all, but not too loud.
So I hope that came through. I just remembered what this was for. Because it's Australia and we'd been out in the sun, she'd had a little bit too much sun and she needed some aloe vera, which was in the fridge because it makes it cool and it's nice. And I just went into ChatGPT and I'm like, create a poem about getting aloe vera from the fridge. And then our text to speech uses 11 Labs, which I've trained to try and sound like Samuel L. Jackson's Jules character in Pulp Fiction. And that's what we got. So I find that fun. Keeps me entertained. So, yeah. James says, you want Zigbee for the locks? You could switch some of your newer Shellys to use Zigbee and free up a lot of IPs. Do the newer Shellys support Zigbee? Let's say yes. They also support Bluetooth. So the new ones support Bluetooth. We could use Bluetooth mesh on those. I'm finding with the Shellys, I'm starting, as I said earlier on, to get much more reliability by locking them to access points. And there's a part of me that's very strongly inclined to go through to each separate Shelly. And maybe what I do is I just go back in Home Assistant. I go to the list here and I find each one that is playing up. I can see one here on our son's balcony, for example, that's just got really shitty connectivity. And I just lock it to an access point. because they should only ever be on the one access point. Like that, they shouldn't be moving, right? I think that would make a lot of sense. What else in the comments here? JMR says ASA, which is ASA Abloy, so they're the ones who make the AO locks, just bought another company like a week ago. They own dang near everyone. Let me get my high horse for a second about these guys. I feel like I had a run-in with them. I can't remember what it was about, so I can't throw them under the bus. What was it? They sell a product here in Australia, which is the Yale Assure lock, and then they sell a newer version, which they only sell in the US. It's really unclear which ones have the Matter module, the Zigbee module, the Wi-Fi module. They haven't been updated for what looks like several years now. And in an IoT world, several years, a lot of time passes. One of the things that they, and actually no one else makes at the moment that I really want, is you cannot, I defy you to find this, you cannot find an IoT door lock for a sliding door. Now, one of the things I love about IoT door locks is when they work reliably, being able to see that everything is locked. Now, when you end up with a lot of doors going to the outside and you're going to bed each night, you know how you do like the walk around the house, like make sure that everything is locked before you go to bed. Every now and then you miss one. And we've got a little automation. In fact, we've got one of these buttons down the bottom of the stairs. So when we're done and we're going to go upstairs and go to bed, we push this one button and it turns all the lights off and it checks. Is the carport door shut? Is the garage door shut? Is the gate locked? Is the front door locked? But it can't check the sliding doors. I'd love to have sliding door support. So that would be nice if you're listening, ASA Abloy, or anyone else who could do it. JMR, I give my wife a button for dinner when I'm outside doing yard work. That sounds much dirtier than what I think you meant. Okay. It is really, really cool. And it is a little bit addictive, right? Like you start trying to find, you know what that's saying? When all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And you start trying to find solutions for everything that are IoT based. You know, when I recently had the problem with water, which I spoke about here, where we got a letter from the council saying using too much water, I was trying to find an IoT solution to measuring the water. That just turned out to be impossible instantly. So everything tends to end up with an IoT solution, and you potentially just make an environment where you've got so many different things that can go wrong. You spend your life troubleshooting all of the different things that you put in there in the first place to make your life better. I mean, this is a good example. So on my stash of IoT things here, this is a hub from Automate. It's an Automate Pulse 2 hub. This is a hub which then talks to the motorized curtains. Now I have a motorized curtain here, which is a little bit pointless because I rarely ever shut that one. We do, however, regularly shut the ones in the master bedrooms because we sleep there. And we've got one very long curtain and one short curtain, 2 motors. These hubs are absolute rubbish. And what I mean by that is we've got a remote control for the curtains. Remote control is beautiful, works fine. Have it next to the bed. Doesn't matter where you are in the room, even where you are in the house, it seems to have good range. The range of these is rubbish. It's obviously talking over a different frequency, or it has a different radio, or whatever it is. They're certainly not IR, the remote either. You can use it under the covers if you so wish. But their ability to actually communicate and control the device is next to completely useless. So sometimes things like this, you just end up going old school, using the remote control. Or you can, with the motorized curtains, you can just give them a little tug and then they just motorize themselves shut. Other things have been super reliable. This is an Aqera. So Aqera is a Chinese company, makes a lot of IoT stuff. An Aqera light and motion sensor. Now I have one of these, you can't see it in the video, but there's one up here, up in the corner of my office, so that when I walk into the office, it can see that there's motion. And when there's motion, if it's dark enough, because it's got the light sensor, it can turn on the lights. Equally, if I'm out of the office and there's been no motion for some period of time, it can start to turn stuff off, which is good. I mean, that's good for the environment, good for electricity, everything else. Now, I did this before I got the fan, which you also can't see. I've got a ceiling fan there. It's a big ass fan. The big ass fan is smart. It has an app. In that app, it can surface both occupancy, which is different to motion. So is there someone in the room, even if it's not moving? It can also do temperature. So I can get the temperature from the fan, and I can also get occupancy, but it doesn't do light. This does light. And I want to be able to decide, I don't need to turn the lights on in my office if it's bright daylight, as it is at the moment. So I can't just use that occupancy reader in the same way that, just as that does temperature, this is just sounding ridiculous as I explain it. We did an air conditioning upgrade recently, which has got thermostats in every room. That thermostat can also expose its temperature via an integration home assistant. So I've got a thermostat, which is just a little, it's not much bigger than this, powered by a CR2032 battery, just like these are, stuck up under my desk that reads the temperature in the room and tells the air conditioning unit what the temp is, so it knows if it should open the baffles or close the baffles to send more air in. So both that thermostat and that fan can read temperature, as can this little one that I have sitting on my desk. I always have that sitting on my desk because I like a visual reference of what is the temperature in my room, because it does heat up. So I've got 3 different things that are IoT connected that do temperature. And then that one does occupancy, and that one does motion. What a mess I created for myself. Now, a lot of the IoT journey for people starts with things like this. That's an IoT light bulb. Now, I do find it kind of wild that this, for all intents and purposes, looks like every other light bulb you've ever seen since you were born. Like when I was a little kid many years ago, this is what light bulbs pretty much looked like. But now they've literally got a Wi-Fi radio in the bulb, which is wild. Not only is it wild that it's a Wi-Fi enabled light bulb, but it's only like $20 down at Bunnings. Now, Bunnings is a massive hardware chain for us. It's Grid Connect, made by a company called Arlec, or branded by a company called Arlec here in Australia. It integrates with the Tuya integration. So I can screw this light bulb in to any old traditional dumb socket in the roof or lamp by the side of the desk, and then join it to the internet, and in this case, control RGB light. It still needs a good Wi-Fi connection. Your Ubiquiti stuff still needs to work. You might have to bind it, lock it to an access point, and isolate it on a VLAN, but other than that, it's really easy. This feels ridiculous just explaining it. Let's look at the comments. Aaron, is Zigbee encrypted though? Couldn't someone steal the key material? I do not know how the security posture of Zigbee works. I do know that you should not just be able to randomly connect to someone's Zigbee network. You need an existing device on the network that you can control, and then you put it into pairing mode, and then you have another device that pairs with it. So that should not be possible. But this is almost a little bit like the foundations that you don't think about when you do this. It's a little bit like every time you go to the kitchen and you turn the tap on, you're not thinking about all the plumbing and how the council brings it into the house and maintains water pressure on the street. Like, I just want to turn the tap on and have it work. I want to join my Zigbee things to the network and have them work. And they all seem fine. Aaron says you can get a smart cylinder for a sliding door. Whether it works or not depends on the locking system. Now, that's the only response I've seen from people. Now, I think what you mean by cylinder is almost like a deadbolt. It's a lock which would then like straight into the ground. It's the only thing I've found, but that's not like a normal door lock. IoT locks will have things like proximity sensors. So is the door actually... This is what I was trying to explain to Charlotte recently, because she didn't want me to install the proximity sensor because it looked a little bit funny. But it's one thing to know whether the bolt in the lock is out or not. It's another thing to know that the door is shut when the bolt is out, because maybe the door's wide open and all you've done is you've pushed the bolt out and people can just walk in and out and go, oh, look at that, the bolt's out, but the door's not shut. So there are other properties of a lock that go beyond just is the bolt out or not. And things like knowing that the door is shut is part of that. So that's what needs to happen with the sliding door lock. Richard's here. G'day, mate. I've been looking at smart locks for sliding doors. Well, hey, if you figured it out, let me know, because That is still one of my greatest IoT frustrations, that we can't do that. Jay Masters, big ass fans are awesome. Yeah, and they look great too. They look really, really neat, and they're very, very quiet. It's interesting looking at all the IoT things and asking, when is IoT just adding internet for the sake of it versus when is IoT actually adding something of value? And what I like about the big ass fans is when you like a fan remote. So that's the remote for the big ass fans. Now I have one of these in our master bedroom as well. It's next to the bed because there are times at night where it starts to feel a little bit warm and I want the fan to go higher. In fact, I'll just give it a tap. This one beeps as well. You can turn off the beep. There's no button on here to turn off the beep. You can also set it, because it's got there's a thermostat in it. Because it's got that, you can say, this is the temperature I want the room to be at. If it gets warmer than that, then run the fan higher. It would be very messy to do that on an interface like a remote control like this. Turn that off because it is cool in here. It's 24.5 degrees in here. But a mobile app is a very good interface for configuring those sorts of things. And if you've got a mobile app, obviously it needs to then IoT its way into the device, in which case you might as well expose all those features to an integration. But I still use the remote pretty much every single night in the master bedroom, because what you can't quite see here in the broad light is as you pick this up, it backlights. So when I'm laying there in bed and it's just like midnight and I've woken up because it's a little bit warm, I can pick this up and just tap the button. And that is a much better human interface than IoT for that use case. But the other use case is that when we've been out of the room for long enough, I want to turn it off. Or I always have it, when I go to bed, I always have it on 3. So when we walk upstairs and we push that little button down the bottom, it can automatically put the fan on 3, which is nice. I think the best use cases for IoT is when you just don't see it happening. We just walk into the room and the fan's going at the right speed. That's awesome. Aaron, the cylinder is the lock part that okay, no, that's what you're saying. Yes, because locks have a cylinder. There are, I can't remember the company. There is a company that literally just does the cylinder of normal door locks. And what I remember about them is that the bolt itself has the battery that goes inside there. As I started looking into that, there were all sorts of problems with it. One of which is that if you effectively have a hollow bolt that can take a battery, it's not particularly strong. The reason I went with Yale smart locks is that Yale makes locks and then they added smart. I really didn't want to go and get like an Akera. You can get Akera, same guys that make these things. You can get Akera smart locks. They're a tech company that decided to make locks. I'm much more worried about someone brute forcing their way into our house, old school style with a crowbar, than I am sitting outside with a laptop. So I would much rather prioritize physical security controls than digital security controls for that use case. What else is here? JMR says, I don't want a million apps to set everything up. I try not to even buy stuff if I need an app other than HO Google Home. And I'm 100% with you. Now, as we have done lots of house renovations and things here, the number of times someone has come in and gone, our thing is smart, there's an app for it. And I'm like, not another fucking app that I've got to deal with. And I'll give you examples. Number 1, this curtain one, there is an app for that. Now, fortunately, there's also a Home Assistant integration, but this is shit anyway, so it doesn't work very well. The garage door, there's an app for that. Now, from memory, there actually wasn't any way of doing Home Assistant integration, but it's got a terminal block, so I can plug a Shelly in. The awning that we have out the back, we have an awning that extends. There's an app for that. Fortunately, also a Home Assistant integration. Big ass fans, there's an app for that. Now, I don't necessarily expect to be able to do everything from Home Assistant either. As an example, I can't remember the last time I updated the firmware on my ceiling fans. So if I go into big ass fans, do I need a firmware update for, let's go to Troy's office. We'll go into Troy's office just here. I mean, this is a good example of the sort of stuff I'll try and not get too much glare on that you can do with the big ass fan and an app. I can go, let's go full speed. That's going to be annoying. Let's turn it off, auto. How do I see if there is a firmware update for my fan? Group name, legacy IR remote, LED indicators, fan beep. So another good example of where an app kind of makes sense, like being able to turn off the fan beep, because if Charlotte's asleep and I'm changing the fan speed in the master, I don't want it beeping. I do not know how to update this firmware. How do we do it? Is it under the gear icon? It's always under the gear icon. While I'm on my high horse about IoT, I'm adamant that the best possible middle ground for IoT and firmware is to be self-healing. It should be self-updating. Yes, it can break sometimes. That is part of the risk. But without being self-healing, you end up with stuff that gets very, very out of date, which then creates other problems as well. So I don't know how to update this firmware. I guess my fan's probably okay. Or can I do it? Can I do it in the products? Oh, firmware update. No, so we've got, how many fans we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different fans. But I can go to firmware update outside the context of that. And it turns out that there are no firmware updates that are needed. Good, I can sleep well now. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm so sick of having so many freaking apps for everything. JMR also says, got a story from Mark Weber Tobias about tech people making locks. It doesn't work out frequently. He tests locks and advises companies. James agrees, best automations are the ones that just work. The extractor fan turning on automagically in the bathroom never fails to make me smile. Yeah, now good example. So I don't have it here, but Akera also do temperature and humidity and pressure sensors. They're actually a little bit smaller than this button. And I have one outside every single shower in the house. And once it sees a rapid change in humidity, it will turn on the fan because the fan has got a Shelly on it. Once that humidity drops enough, and there's a Home Assistant helper actually that does this. Someone else wrote it. It's great. I just pulled it in and set it up. Once the humidity drops enough, it turns off the fan. Now that's a good idea of stuff working seamlessly most of the time. The gap is that these run CR2032 batteries. They're meant to last up to 2 years. They die every now and then. So I've literally got in my Home Assistant dashboard a Zigbee page that just lists unavailable Zigbees. Now at the moment, the garage weather Zigbee is not responding. The beer fridge bottom weather, I put these in the fridge too. And the reason I put them in the fridge is because the number of times someone goes to get a drink out of the fridge and they walk away, they tap the door, and the door almost closes. And then you go to get a cold beer 5 hours later and it's not cold. Or worse, you get up the next morning and someone hasn't shut the fridge properly. Or, there's been a jar or something in the way. It hasn't closed properly. And now the fridge is at like 20 degrees. Okay, well, that's great. We're chucking out all that meat and whatever else in there. Beer fridge bottom is not responding. And the wine fridge top is not responding. The wine fridge got 2 zones. But the problem is that as soon as you start putting these things in really cold conditions, those of you who live in cold conditions will know where this is going, batteries don't last as long. Plus, you put them in a fridge and the signal isn't as good. So I think part of my problem here is that these Akera temperature sensors are probably not the best ones to be put in really cold conditions. But yes, I agree with you. Like when they just work, that's fantastic. And that is exactly what we want. We want the automagic stuff. JMR says, Home Assistant can manage firmware updates if you get compatible devices. Yes, but this is the key, isn't it? Home Assistant can do firmware updates for Shellys. Now, my experience with that in Home Assistant is it pops up and it says there's a Shelly that needs an update. And you're okay, go to the Shelly, do the update. Except I got 102 of them. But the Shellys have, as I mentioned before, an API. And I've written a script against that API. So I can just go through and enumerate every single Shelly in the house and update them all, which is good. Evil Cougar, have you done a test when there is no internet to see what IoT devices still work. Yeah, good example. Good question. I haven't. I almost need to do like a business continuity BCP kind of test of let's test a failover and just see how much shit breaks. I mean, I know, for example, that the door locks will not work by talking to the lady on the phone. They will not work via Home Assistant. They're internet dependent. But I also know that I can fall back to PIN. That works if I'm on the inside. Obviously, I can just turn the latch, so that works. The Shellys I know will work because they're self-contained, but I won't be able. I don't think. Does Siri work with no internet? Good question. But I know I can open up Home Assistant on the app and have total local control over that. To be honest, like internet dropping is extraordinarily rare for us, and the impact as it relates to IoT things is very, very low because we have fallback positions. And even the fact that every one of these Shellys, the switch on the wall still works, is a good example of how, even without IoT, stuff is still fine. James says, should show up on the homepage when you open the app under menu firmware update. Where's firmware update? Or is it in the integration itself? Because I don't have anything related to firmware on the settings page. Let me know. JMR says, I set up notifications to tell me when batteries are low and stuff. Many devices report battery. Yes, I've done the same thing. 10 o'clock every morning, I get an alert for anything that has low batteries. That doesn't help when a device just drops off or is not broadcasting battery state. So, and again, the kludge that is the IoT world, when you look at all the different things that we're plugging in, they just simply don't all work the same way. They don't have the same consistent approach to everything from firmware updates to reporting battery state. So you end up having to treat every sort of unique device in a different way. JMR has a smart bulb in the fridge to detect the door open. I use sensors with AA batteries in fridge freezers because of cold. Now, there is a point where you open the door a little bit and there's no light. This is at least for our fridge. Open the door a little bit and there's no light. Open it far enough and there's light. But there is this little gap where the door is not shut and the light is not on. And that's been our problem. And then the beer and the wine fridge are those, wine fridge style things where it's a clear glass door and there's always a light on behind it. So that's the problem with that. Binderman, I'm a little confused on the IoT solution. Most fridges beep. Depends. Depends if the door is open or not. And of course, it depends on the fridge. And again, there's this little bit there where the fridge might not be open enough to be considered open to turn the light on, to do the beep if it stays open, but it is open enough to let the cold air out and get warm. And it's that little bit in between. To be honest, it's a little bit in between that's the most predominant problem, because if you've just tapped the fridge and walked away, at a glance, it looks shut. And it's only when you notice, it's actually sticking out about 5 mil. It's not shut and the cold air is coming out. And in a way, this almost becomes almost like a closed circuit solution. Well, that's not the right word, but a failover kind of solution where regardless of the state of the fridge, doors open, doors shut, whatever, if it's getting warm, it's a problem. And that's what I like about the temp sensors. We've just got to get reliable ones. JMar says, if your door lock has NFC, you might be able to put a tag in your watch band. That would so mess up the aesthetics of my Apple Watch Ultra with that nice metal bracelet. It's not band. No, we should not have to do that. That's okay. Now James is talking about Big R, so I assume that's related to where the firmware update is. And JMR also says with the fridges, if you're close enough to hear it, because one of the problems is, one of the kids did this the other day, but they've obviously gotten something out of the fridge and then gone to bed. And they're not going to hear the fridge, even if it is wide open and beeping once you go to bed. So anyway, that's the problem with IoT. It is evolutionary, and it's going to continue to. And the thing is, like, we're all here on the ground floor, right? Like, this is such an early time for IoT, and even for me, like, it was only 5 years ago I started mucking around with this stuff. And obviously, there was some degree of IoT before that, but arguably, it's really only gained traction in very recent years. So we're at the very ground floor. We're watching things evolve. We've had things, standards like Matter come along since that time, which will hopefully start to make things better. But hey, it keeps me busy. Right, last comments here, and then we'll wrap it up because this has been a really long one today. David has a fridge at work which just sucks at holding temperature, even if it's closed internally. One of the things you learn, I didn't know this about fridges, but some of you are probably like, yeah, it's obvious. The temperature inside the fridge changes very regularly, and certainly for our fridges, there's a real pattern. So I've got an appliances view here on my dashboard, and if I look at the beer fridge, for example, now the top's still reporting, the bottom's not reporting. The reason I got two is I was finding that there was actually quite a big difference between the top of the fridge and the bottom. But I can see a very clear oscillating pattern that's running at, let's see, that peak there is at 10:54 last night. This peak is at 1:15 midnight. So call it like every hour 20 or something. It oscillates from 4.5 degrees to 6 degrees. Doesn't matter too much for a beer fridge, but interesting. It just keeps oscillating. So obviously, like, that compressor kicks in or something, cools it way down, stops, temp starts coming up, cools it way down, stops, and it just repeats. So yeah, they're not exactly perfect. David, the temp at which the temp is what affects food. That's the source of truth you should be watching. Yeah, exactly. Like the light bulb or the beep is not the issue. What I want to know about is the temp. Aaron says, if you guys are upgrading your networks, would you future-proof beyond 1 gigabit? Yeah, absolutely. Anything wired, I'd definitely future-proof beyond 1 gigabit, because I would argue that we're already beyond 1 gigabit because many internet providers have multi-gigabit connection speeds today, let alone in the future. But all that future-proofing really looks like at the moment is, if you're going to be running cabling through walls, which is very hard to change later on, then make it Cat 6e, and you should be able to get 10 megabits out of Cat 6e, can't you? I've still got my ChatGPT here. What about Cat 6e? Speed for Cat 6e? Short answer, Cat 6e isn't officially what Cat 6e actually means. There's no, did I typo this? It's essentially Cat 6. 10 gigabits up to 55 meters. It's effectively Cat 6a, 10 gigabits, 100 meters. Cat 6a. Sorry, thank you. Was I thinking 5? I don't know. Been doing this too long. I would argue that 10 gigabits is going to give you a lot of future proofing. I don't know. Maybe we'll be sitting here doing this in 20 years from now going, I wish we had done something different. But stuff that's wired in walls is the stuff that's hard to change later on. Switches, access points, and everything else, yeah, okay, you pay money for them, but at least you can easily upgrade them in the future. JMR says, honestly, I originally put the temp sensor in the fridge to detect if the fridge broke. Stop from losing one fridge full of food and it pays off. Yeah, exactly. And we've definitely lost fridges full of food. And the thing you can do, just for the uninitiated, is, I know this is a button, but the temp sensors look almost the same. If that detects the fridge is too warm, you can create an alert in Home Assistant. There is a native construct that is an alert. An alert can then do things like speak through the Sonos, which we do, keep reminding your watch, which we do. So both Charlotte and I get constant reminders audibly and on the watch if, for example, the fridge is too warm, which also can be annoying, but then you can go in, turn off the alert. So I've got one dashboard in Home Assistant here, which is just alerts. We've got an alert if the carport door is left open too long. Every now and then we have tradespeople here, it needs to stay open, go and turn off the alert. It's cool. David says, definitely duty cycle. The compressor runs, which brings the temp down, and then it stops and the temp rises. Yep, I agree with that. Seems to be the case. JMR says, I got Cat 8 now. How fast is Cat 8? How fast is Cat 8? Cat 8 is very fast, but very specialized. 40 gigabit, apparently. So maximum length 30 meters. Okay. Maybe I'll have to look at that. By the time we actually start building stuff over there, I'll figure out which cat we need for our Ethernet cable. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up there. That is a very long weekly update, hour and 34 minutes at this point. Thanks very much for watching. I'll come and do this in a week from now. Have an awesome Christmas, because that's going to happen between now and then. And then next week I'll do the last one from here. And then after that, all over the place. We'll talk about that next week. See you, folks.